shopping online can make buying presents a breeze for some people. Click, 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 tap, 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 done, done, done. But for others,
to actually be out in the world shopping in person, you're opening yourself up to chance, to serendipity, being able to walk into a department store and kind of rotate your head. You might see something and find something that you hadn't set out for.
what about you? Do you feel that kind of romance when you're browsing in a store? Hi, I'm Paul Havershrud. Welcome to The Cost of Living. The mall in December, a sea of teenagers in puffy jackets, the je ne sais quoi of the food court. Is that your cup of tea? Coming up later, we have a defense of shopping in real life. And it was a 10 out of 10 weird year for the economy. How did Canada get through it? We'll check in on that and whether next year could be, fingers crossed, any less weird. Up first, a big city lawyer home for the holidays is inspired to follow her true passion, baking cupcakes, by the handsome grandson of a local shoe store owner. Lacey Chabert stars in All I Want for Christmas is Shoe. Okay, that's fake, but the economics behind Hallmark movies are very real. If you've seen one Hallmark movie, you know what they're about. They're syrupy sweet, predictable.
Usually you meet the guy, you don't always get along with the guy. That's like a very common. A fish out of water is usually the beginning. So it's either the big city girl goes back to the small town or the small town girl goes to the big city.
Corey Lee doesn't care that Hallmark movies are formulaic. During the holidays, if one's on TV, she's watching it. Because, well, the heart wants what the heart wants.
I love them because I know how they're going to end. It's beautiful. It's Christmas time. Give me the warm fuzzies. And I want to know you're going to be in love at the end. I love it. I love the cheese. I love the romance. Like, that's who I am. I'm a romantic gal. I'm a Scorpio.
We may all be Scorpios at this time of year. Because a lot of people, when they're home, like Corey, they flip on a Hallmark movie.
Why not? I love some, I don't like calling it background noise, but I love something on all the time.
And sometimes it's you.
And sometimes it's randomly me, yes.
Yeah, so, should have mentioned, Corey's also an actor. She's been in a bunch of Hallmark stuff. The last one she did, she played Bonnie in My Grown-Up Christmas List. Hallmark is rolling out 24 new movies in this year's Countdown to Christmas. And when you add up all of its seasonal offerings, between Valentine's Day, June weddings, Thanksgiving, Hallmark cranks out more than 100 movies a year. Andrea Braithwaite is a professor at Ontario Tech University. She's researched the meet-cute between Hallmark and pop culture.
In the U.S. broadcasting landscape right now, it's 24-hour news channels, sports channels, and Hallmark. And most other kinds of television programming is really struggling.
So Hallmark movies may never be critical darlings. They might even be a punchline. But financially, they could be getting the last laugh. So how did Hallmark make that happen? To answer that, we need a bit of history. Back in 1914, the Hall brothers, out of Kansas City, figured overseas soldiers would like getting cards in the mail. So they got into the greeting card business. A few years later, they invented wrapping paper. In the 50s, they sponsored the first opera written for TV, and that led to the Hallmark Hall of Fame. Now, these were big-budget movies of the week. You might remember them. They ran on U.S. network TV for decades. They had brand-name actors, complex plots. They were often tearjerkers. And when Hallmark bought a cable channel in 2001, they would play them in reruns. But they don't have a lot in common with what we now call a Hallmark movie. Those candy cane-soaked romances started about 10 years ago.
That is when we see them really start to push not just more Christmas movies, but more year-round movies. And so that is where the tone of the current movies really takes off.
That tone is cozy and nostalgic. Now, Hallmark keeps that same feeling across everything it does. If you're watching a movie, you might see a reindeer tchotchke or a live, laugh, love sign. Hallmark wants you to be able to go into their store and buy that same vibe. The company calls it emotion marketing. And movies are the gateway to creating those feelings. And the movies themselves aren't just a loss leader. Hallmark makes money on them too. How they do it, that could be the real holiday magic. Hallmark shoots its movies on a relative shoestring. It makes a bunch of them here in Canada, where our low dollar and government tax credits can combine to cut production costs in half. And then they trim those costs further wherever they can. They shoot movies in 2 to 3 weeks. That speed cuts down on all kinds of expenses.
Like any equipment rentals or costume rentals, food trucks, that sort of thing. They reuse sets, they reuse locations, they reuse props, they reuse like wardrobe.
If you think, hey, I've seen that gazebo before, you probably have. And then there's something like snow. Gotta have that white Christmas. But it's expensive. So what do? Well, Corey Lee has seen how the sausage, or the snowflakes, get made.
There's various different types of snow. The cheapest of snows is when they kind of like blanket the background in kind of like a fake foamy, styrofoamy situation. It's like a blanket.
Hey, making fake snow when you're shooting in July? That costs real money.
I have never had the luxury of having the real snow. It's always the blankets, and then they even will like put kind of like shaved ice on top of it.
So Hallmark has dialed in the business side of movie making. But that's not all it's figured out. It also knows exactly who its movies are for.
Hallmark certainly has a target audience. It's said to be women aged 25 to 54. But I think it probably, in reality, from what I've seen, skews a little bit older than that.
Valerie Ellen Kretz is a media studies professor at St. Norbert College in Wisconsin. And she says TV shows traditionally go after the same kind of viewer, young adults in their peak spending years. By skewing older, Hallmark could be exploiting a gap in the ad market.
We don't often see 20-somethings leading a Hallmark movie. And that's unusual, right? And I think that speaks to who it is that they're really targeting. It is that slightly older profile.
If you were a fan of Party of Five in the 90s, you may think of Lacey Chabert as Little Claudia. She's in her 40s now, and a Hallmark staple. So is Lori Loughlin of Full House, who's in her 60s. A lot of Hallmark's casting choices appeal to an older demographic that some advertisers really want to reach.
Pharmaceuticals is something that's frequently seen. What I've seen is products that are targeting a slightly older audience, and clearly then there is a market for that, right? But I think it's reflected in those advertising dollars that are being spent there.
Valerie says the rest of the entertainment industry might want to take notes on what Hallmark is doing to make money. It doesn't just make a movie and then sell commercials. It runs contests with cruise lines. It sells product placements. Companies like KitchenAid will sponsor its movies. Hallmark works all the angles. It did a brand partnership with the NFL. It made Holiday Touchdown, a Bills love story. But then it made a different movie, set in a hospital.
Where they had Damar Hamlin, who's a Bills player, make a cameo in the movie promoting the sponsor, who is Heartmates, an Abbott philanthropic program.
So Damar Hamlin, he'd had a cardiac arrest on the field during Monday Night Football. Now, he survived, and then he went on to make a cameo in a Hallmark movie.
There's this triangulation there that is just so smart. A real Bills player who had a well-known medical emergency make a cameo in the film talking about this program that is sponsored by Abbott, who was also the sponsor of the film.
Sure, Hallmark movie plots are tired, the characters are underdeveloped, they're predictable. But Valerie says our world is so uncertain, sometimes people just want to know they're getting a happy ending. So Hallmark has managed to turn criticisms, like predictability, into an asset.
Oh, well, they're just fluff and they're not important and they're so formulaic, you know exactly what's going to happen. In this circumstance, you want to know what's going to happen. That is the appeal. It's like they've taken the critique and they've leaned into it, and it's so appealing to audiences for that very reason.
The meet cute with the flannel-wearing owner of a Christmas tree farm. The almost kiss. The small town that can support several thriving cupcake shops. Sure, none of this is exactly Jean-Luc Godard, but
it's like the Hallmark movies are checkers, but Hallmark themselves are playing 3D chess.
that could actually be a good movie premise. Big city marketing exec takes the wrong train on Christmas Eve, ends up playing chess at a small town board game cafe. Danica McKellar stars in Holiday Checkmate. I'd watch that. Happy holidays, everyone. This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. The thought of going to a mall at this time of year, finding parking, schlepping your way around, waiting in line, for some of us, it's like something out of Dante's Seventh Circle of Hell. But not Jason Gurriel.
I'm a writer. I live in Toronto. I've written poetry, a couple of novels, and my latest essay collection is called Fan Mail, A Guide to What We Love, Loathe, and Mourn.
One of the things he loves? Shopping in real life. Lugging around his parka, food court chaos, he wants it all. But why?
I work in front of a screen all day, so the idea of then spending more time in front of a laptop in the evening ordering stuff is kind of awful. When you punch something into a search bar, you get a list of options. Often you're at the mercy of the algorithm. The site is pushing certain things on you, and scrolling through things we might want to buy, or worse, like watching someone else, a significant other, scrolling through stuff. There's nothing worse than actually not being the scroller, but having to watch the other person scroll. Oh, what is there not to loathe? I mean, the box arrives, it's the filthy box. You have no idea when you open that box if the thing is going to be the right thing or if it's going to be damaged. I can't tell you how many times we've opened these boxes and I'm like, that seems a bit smaller than it should be. It's not a fun box to open. So I've really just felt the pull to be back out in stores, combing through bins, looking at shelves, and trying to actually be among real people again. I love going out and looking at stuff and just browsing, even when I don't make a purchase. My father he was sort of like a world champion browser. He loved looking at watches and expensive fountain pens under glass. For him, it was almost like an aesthetic experience. It was almost akin to going to a museum or something. We didn't do a lot of that as a family, but we would go, I don't know, maybe looking at the expensive watches was our version of that. But my dad was much older when he had me, and he just was a product of a different world where you saved your money to buy something. And so if you wanted the expensive fountain pen, you might look at it for a while you were saving the money to buy it. And so I got a taste of that, and I just have these deep memories of being out and about with him, and not always like for the purpose of making the purchase, right? But of just being together and maybe looking at something that you really wanted but you couldn't quite afford. Even just like a week ago, on my lunch break, I ran down to the Eaton Center. I wanted to see if I could get some ideas for a Christmas gift for my wife. I walked through, I had no idea what I was looking for. My eyes fell on something totally by chance. I won't say what it is in case she's listening to this, but it was a terrific gift. I would never have come upon that gift scrolling online. To actually be out in the world, shopping in person, you're opening yourself up to chance, to serendipity, being able to walk into a department store and kind of rotate your head. You might see something and find something that you hadn't set out for.
Jason Duriel is a Toronto writer. His essay, In Defense of IRL Shopping, is in his new book, Fan Mail, a guide to what we love, loathe, and mourn. Here's a little holiday ditty for you. Giddy up economy, pick up your feet, produce around the clock. Okay, that's probably enough. But 'tis the season to look at where things are at with the economy. How did we get here? Where could we be going? And here were some answers about the roller coaster year that was, and some thoughts on whether things could go back to normal-ish. We're joined by Carl Shimada. He's the chief marketing strategist at Corpay. Hi, Carl.
Hey there. I was definitely trying not to laugh during the intro there. You have a fantastic singing voice.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that literally everybody listening would have to agree with you, because how could they not? But Carl, on a scale of 1 to 10, how weird was the year that we just had?
I mean, I think easily a 10. It was weird on a number of levels. We had, this sort of huge shock and sort of sense of betrayal as, the US sort of turned against Canada from a trade standpoint. Then we had essentially a series of what we might call bullwhip effects playing out across the global economy and the Canadian economy itself, in the sense that we had really rapid inventory shifts. We had big changes in direction in terms of investment and sentiment, huge market volatility, all of that sort of playing out across that backdrop of a global economy that still hasn't settled from the pandemic, and so weird, no question of it.
If you think about the spring when we got tariffs, at that time there was a lot of talk about Canada maybe getting pushed into a recession, maybe like a deep recession, but that didn't happen. How did we manage to weather this particular storm?
Yeah, there's a couple of major factors here. One is that American businesses tried to import as much as they could from their Canadian counterparts as quickly as possible once tariffs were announced. Then we had, the lagging impact of the rate cuts that happened over the last couple of years coming through and helping households a little bit and helping, businesses do a bit of investment. And then lastly, we had, this fiscal boost coming from the federal government. And so, the effect of all of this has been to insulate the economy somewhat from the impact of this huge rise in uncertainty and the darker outlook for exports.
I mean, how much of a relief is that? Because I just keep thinking about, March, April, May, and just thinking, this is like gloom and doom. And now we're like, okay, we're managing. I mean, just emotionally, how do you feel, as someone who's Canadian who follows Canada's economy?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because for me, I'm quite optimistic, and it's really strange to be optimistic, given that we've taken such a huge hit. But when we think about, what has happened to the Canadian economy over the last year, this is really in my view, been a reality check, right? It's been, a reminder that Canada does exist in this sort of geopolitical environment, and that we do need to focus on competitiveness. It's sort of driven home the idea that we do need to work together as a country. We do need to lower those barriers between provinces and things like that. What all of that boils down to is that we actually have an opportunity here. I think this has been a reminder that will get us putting the one foot in front of another, and improving competitiveness in Canada over the long run, which at the end of the day makes Canada much stronger, and helps to improve living standards.
Hmm. You track a lot of numbers and a lot of indicators for the global economy. Is there anything in particular, any one indicator, any one stat, any one number that really stands out to you right now for the direction of which way things are headed? Whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things to kind of point out there. One is just global trade. So global trade has actually increased this year, fairly substantially relative to last year. I don't have the numbers straight to hand, but the fact of the matter is that despite all of this, incredible negativity and concern, the flow of goods going around the world has actually increased, right? And that points to stronger global growth. It points to a global economy that has taken this hit, and is continuing to move. And then I think the other indicator that is very relevant here in the Canadian context right now is the level of economic policy uncertainty, and so this is a measure of how much uncertainty we're seeing in the media on an ongoing basis, and how much that tells us that economic policy is going to change in the future. And so, if we look at this across countries, the Canadian level of economic policy uncertainty is way above everybody else, across the major developed economies. And so, the funny thing about the situation right now is that Canadians are more fearful than almost any of their counterparts globally, and yet we're in a better position from a fundamental standpoint.
I'm sorry, just to break that down a little bit. So we're more fearful than other countries here in Canada. Is that just because of our relationship with the U.S. and just our proximity and our closeness?
Yes, Canadians are looking at all of this. They're incredibly uncertain about what the Trump administration might do next, or what the next crop of U.S. politicians might do, and that's translating into a reluctance among businesses to invest, and among consumers to spend, and to make those big purchases that are higher risk. Put it that way.
So that's a threat to the economy. Let me ask it this way, I guess. What would be the biggest threat to Canada's economy over the next year?
Yeah, I say it is that it's psychology. It's the idea that at some point Canadians, they stop spending, they stop investing, and they go to ground. If that happens, then you have a big drop in domestic consumption, and you have cascading effects across the economy. I personally don't think that that's the way it's going to go, but it definitely is a threat.
But you've also mentioned some opportunities because I feel like you've got some optimism. You said, I'm optimistic. What would be the biggest opportunity coming in the next year?
The opportunity that I think a lot of us should be looking at is just the fact that the fundamentals in the global economy are still strong. The customers for Canadian exports are still there. We still do have a competitive edge in many areas, and so I think the opportunity is to go out and talk to those opportunities, and to open up those opportunities.
Does that surprise you? It surprised me when you said that global trade is actually up. That's not something I would have thought, despite it seems the US's best efforts to actually knock it down. The fact that it's going up and you're saying that Canada has these kinds of opportunities, is any of that surprising?
It is surprising. I think the expectation would be that individuals and businesses around the world would have cut their spending this year, and that would drive a decline in trade. But, to some extent, the opposite has happened. If we look at the major consumption engines around the world, they're still spending. We're still seeing goods moved between countries. And the tariffs, they only apply really to the U.S. and its trading partners, right? So a lot of the trade that's happening is happening outside the U.S. and working around those tariffs. Supply chains are lengthening. You're seeing more, trade going through third countries like, Vietnam, Cambodia, et cetera. But yeah, long story short here, though, the reality is that as long as the global economy is growing, the laws of international trade dictate that the company or the countries with the lowest costs and the greatest productivity are still going to be well positioned to do trade. So it's a quite hopeful reality relative to the narrative that's out there.
Carl, this conversation, I didn't really know what to expect going into it. It's been a little more optimistic than I thought it might have been. I mean, as you look at 2026 and how you're feeling, are you feeling kind of sunny about things?
Not exactly. So the funny part is that, without question, we have huge headwinds facing the Canadian economy. We know that, the housing market, especially in centers like Toronto and Vancouver, is, going to remain soft for a while yet. So it's not like we're, going to flip the calendar and suddenly, be singing Kumbaya in the streets, but the longer term view, I think, is that when we look at those big imbalances in the Canadian economy between the real estate sector, the energy sector, and the real economy, a lot of that appears to be dissolving, and that makes me very hopeful for Canada's long-term economic stability, its growth, and kind of weirdly, its political stability. I think that some of the changes underway should help us avoid some of the terrible things that are happening in other countries around the world.
Well, not exactly kind of took the wind out of my sails, Carl. But you know what? We'll take it. If that's where you're at, we're kind of feels like steady. If not sunny, steady.
Yes. And that's a pretty good thing considering what we've just been through.
Absolutely. Well, Carl, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Carl Shimada is the Chief Marketing Strategist at Corpay. That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Leah Hendry, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff, Mixmaster Elf Kynock. Oh, and if you have a minute, all we really want for the holidays is, you could rate and review our podcast. Give us 5 stars. That would be a great holiday gift. And we really hope you're getting all the presents that you want. Hope you're having a great holiday season. I'm Paul Havershrud. Thanks for listening.